To understand how mRNA vaccine works, one has to know 4 things. 1. How does the biological cell work? 2. What does a virus do when intruding into a cell? 3. What is the role of the immune system? And 4. How does vaccination work? The human body contains 100 trillion cells. That is 100,000 times a billion, a 15-digit number. Each of these cells has more or less the same structure. They all have a nucleus, here in red, embedded in the cell body. The whole cell is covered by the so-called membrane. The nucleus is like a safe containing a huge library filled with our genes. That is construction plans, manuals, and formulas. In a nutshell, the nucleus is a safe repository with all gene information the cell owns. The surrounding cell body can be imagined as a big factory yearning for work assignments. The factory with its embedded safe is covered by the cell membrane. The cell membrane prevents objects and materials from leaving or entering the cell. That works like a sealed box around the factory. Of course, there are inlets and outlets to the factory due to the nature of a production site. The library in the nucleus is made of DNA. DNA is very stable and ideal for long-term storage. However, the DNA language is poorly understood in the cell body in the factory. That is why the DNA needs to be translated into a language that is actually understood in the factory. This language is called mRNA. The DNA manuals from the nucleus or cell safe are translated into short working instructions written in mRNA. When these mRNA working instructions enter the cell body, the factory immediately starts following them. In fact, the cell factory must follow mRNA working instructions and cannot resist them. That would go on forever if mRNA would not prove to be very unstable. It takes usually just a few minutes for mRNA to disperse, just like a handwritten note in the rain. Now, let's focus on point number 2, the virus. A virus can be considered a small container with genetic information. It carries all those information needed for a cell factory to copy and reproduce exactly that virus. If a virus succeeds to pass the sealed box or membrane around the cell factory, all working instructions needed to build a new, fully functional virus is displayed in the midst of the cell factory. As said, this mandates the factory to start production. The cell produces new viruses, and lots of them. The cell will produce hundreds or even thousands of new virus copies. These virus copies will be spilled out of the cell, and now they can infect hundreds and thousands of new cells. In no time, millions and millions of cells are forced to produce viruses and only viruses, instead of carrying out their intended purposes. This will lead to severe damage or even death of the organism if there would not be. 3. The immune system. The immune system is permanently surveying the whole organism in search of intruders and foreign bodies. Also, viruses are identified as foreign bodies and destroyed by dedicated immune cells. Destroying foreign bodies is a rather slow process, and if virus production happens to be faster than the destruction, then the race between virus production and the immune system ends with millionfold virus attacks, ending with the above described outcome. Luckily enough, the immune system has an ace in the hole, helping to fight intruders and foreign bodies. It is called antibodies. It takes a few days or even weeks for the immune system to produce these antibodies. But the antibodies will then fit exactly to the outer core or structure of the foreign bodies, in this case the virus. This inhibits the virus to intrude into new cells. Fewer new viruses will be produced until virus production finally ceases. The dedicated immune cells will then destroy any virus left. The great thing is that there is something called immunological memory. The immune system will in fact remember foreign bodies, for example viruses, it has met before. If a virus now appears again, also years later, the immune system will remind itself and start antibody production immediately. In the race between virus production and the immune system gets a lab advantage. This takes us to 4. How does vaccination work? It is possible to give the immune system an advantage by default in its fight against germs and viruses. By telling the immune system how germs and viruses look like, the immunological memory can be trained without even having to meet the real bad guys, but just their looks. This is called vaccination. For the vaccination, either inactivated vaccines, that is dead viruses or germs, or attenuated vaccines are used. The latter means viruses that have a reduced activity. These vaccine viruses cannot, or just very limited, induce virus production in the cell factory. In any case, these vaccine viruses are presented to the immune system. This leads to antibody production and thus to generalization in the immunological memory. Should a real, intact virus appear in the body, antibody production starts immediately. The immune system gets a lab advantage in the race, and often virus production can be fully prevented. Now, let's talk about the mRNA vaccination against corona. The mRNA vaccine contains the working instructions of the look of the coronavirus. More specific, it contains the working instruction how to build the spike protein sitting in the outer core of the coronavirus. This working instruction is placed in a container that easily can pass the cell membrane and intrude into a cell. That way, the mRNA working instruction on how to build coronavirus spike protein is displayed within the cell factory. Remember, immediately the cell factories will start producing spike proteins, but only spike proteins. All other information on the coronavirus is not contained in the vaccine, so of course, no complete viruses can be produced. The cells will spill out the spike proteins into the blood circulation, where the immune system will spot them as foreign bodies. In the course of a few days and weeks, antibodies against these spike proteins will be produced, and the look of the spike proteins will be memorized. Should a real, intact coronavirus appear in the body, the immune system will remember the spike proteins and start antibody production immediately. The antibodies will cover the spikes on the coronavirus and prevent the virus intrusion into the cells. As a result, there will be no virus production.